Hello, everyone. This is Chidam Knebel. Today we have Elisheva Schwartz. She is a dyslexia researcher, mother, wife, and a podcast host. She's on a mission to decode the dyslexic mind and empower parents of children with dyslexia with tools to support and unleash the potential of their children. So, welcome, Elisheva.
Welcome. I'm so excited you're doing this. It's a
Oh,
pleasure to be here.
I'm so honored that you're on the summit. I love your podcast. I've been a big fan from day one, and after going through the course with you, which we'll talk about in a short while, the help you have given me and our family has been just tremendous. So I want to thank you.
My absolute pleasure.
So the reason that our paths crossed is that I was looking at ways to help my son improve his self-confidence. I did realize that as he went from first grade to second grade, he started kind of acting out and trying to hide his dyslexia and his shortcomings. And I didn't want him to grow up with the sense that he was less than everybody else in his class. I felt like, reading would come, writing would come, and with the technology, there could be a lot of support we could give him. But I knew that self-confidence was something that he would carry all his life, and that was one of the most important things for me. And that's where our paths cross. So let's dive into self-esteem right away. So maybe you can explain to us, what is self-esteem and why is it so important?
So self-esteem is our view of our worth, our competence, and our abilities. And it's the reason why I'm getting tricked up is because there are two terms. There's one term, self-esteem, and under self-esteem, there's another term called self-efficacy, which is our view of how capable we are to actually go ahead and do what we want to do. So if we want to start a business, our sense of self-efficacy is how capable do we think we are to actually get that done. So self-esteem is kind of a broad view, and it's just generally our view of ourselves. And a category of self-esteem is self-efficacy, which is our view of how capable we are. And individuals that are dyslexic, if their dyslexia is not dealt with or treated, and for whatever reason, if they're struggling in their school environment, very often it can trip up not only their self-esteem, but even their self-efficacy. And then they go throughout life being hesitant and doubtful of whether they have what it takes to be successful in the endeavors that they're endeavoring, which can have a huge impact, in every area of your life, especially in your school and work life.
That's great, and it's a great point about self-efficacy. That's also very important. I agree with you there. So what are the you mentioned a little bit about what affects children, because if they're not treated, for example. So what are the symptoms that parents should be looking out for when they look at their children and say, okay, these are the things maybe are the symptoms where I should be working on their self-esteem?
Yeah, I think parents are actually the first responders. They're the ones that usually know very clearly if your child is thriving, if your child is doing well, if your child feels confident and good about themselves, or if things are starting to go downhill. It's usually the parents that right away they'll notice the difference. Right away they'll see in their home whether their child is acting up, if he's getting panicky, if he's getting avoidant, if he's getting sullen, if he says he doesn't want to go to school. We see lots of kids that are trying to be sick, or they have headaches, or they have stomach aches, or they're refusing to do their homework. It's these little things that come up that a parent, when you know your child and you notice that all of a sudden these things are coming up and they didn't come up before, parents are usually the ones that right away they can tell that something is off. And then very often parents talk to teachers, or they talk to other people, and sometimes teachers say, oh, it's no big deal, or this is what all kids are like, or all kids could be frustrated or angry, or this is what it means to be 8 or 9. But parents usually, they know if their child is not in a good place, they're not flourishing, and they're not that there's something that is bothering your child, that there's something that's in your child's space. So I think that very often parents notice, but they don't all know that it goes under this category of where there's this shaky sense of self-esteem. So they don't realize that, like, avoidant behavior where a child doesn't want to avoid in difficult tasks, they're afraid to do anything that they might not be good at, that can fall under the category of self-esteem. They don't realize that, anxiety around school, anxiety around the classroom, being panicky, all those meltdowns, tantrums, all of that can actually fit under the category of self-esteem. And all those behaviors are actually protective behaviors that the child is making sure that they will not engage in a task that will challenge their image of themselves being competent or capable or successful. So if the child is refusing to do their homework or they're having a tantrum, then that's a way that they're protecting themselves so that they don't need to deal with failure. So I think that parents usually know if something is off. Sometimes they don't necessarily look at it as a self-esteem issue, but they do very often know that their child isn't flourishing or doing as well as they could be.
That's true. And I talk to many parents and they say, well, something is off and they're just angry. And I don't think they connect the dots that there is a big connection on these symptoms and the acting out they see and self-esteem. And hopefully the message will be out and they will look into it further. So for those parents who do want to look into it further, like what are the things, what are tools that they can use to support their children?
Yeah, well, that's a huge question. And it's been a question that I've been really exploring very thoroughly in my work. And that's why now I've created this 6-week course that parents can go through together in community and really explore all the tools in which they can support their children. But little like take-home things that I can give you on this interview is I think that it's very important for parents to really slow down and listen to what's going on in the child's experience, because in every parenting moment, there's an opportunity to either control or to connect. So let's say you have a child and it's time to do homework and your child never wants to do homework, is saying no, no, no. So at that point, you have an opportunity to either say, you must do your homework, or look at it as an opportunity for connection and ask inquisitive questions like, it seems like you really don't want to do homework now. And why is that? And then the child might start talking and say, I'm so tired after school, or this or that. And it doesn't mean later you don't say, well, you have to do your homework. It doesn't mean later you don't, as a parent, do what feels right for you and your circumstance, but it does mean that you notice that every opportunity you can control or connect, and to as often as possible, instead of just, you must go to school, you must do your homework, control, to try to use those opportunities where there's a disciplinary flare-up as an opportunity to connect. Because when there is a flare-up, something is happening, your child is, having a disciplinary moment, that there's a lot of rich data that's coming up. There's a lot of information for the parent that something's not working and the child is trying to communicate something or trying to exert control or safety over something. So if we can slow down and in that moment try to connect, then that's extremely helpful.
That's a great point. And I believe that the words we use do trigger emotions. And I have been very careful on the words that I use with my children after I've been through your course, so that I would connect with them easier. Sometimes, it's just easy to get that, oh, I can't believe, just do your homework, versus, okay, just take a deep breath. And this is not about me. This is about them. Let's connect. So what is some vocabulary that you could recommend the parents to use?
Some well, it really depends on every circumstance. Every circumstance and age will be different, but I would give you something that's helpful that makes it a little bit more concrete, like how to connect instead of to control. And that is something that I've started doing in the new course, that when the cohort that you were in, I didn't do, but I have a new worksheet in the beginning of the journey, and it's called Exploring Shame Triggers Worksheet for Parents. So as an opportunity for them to be a compassionate clearing. What it is it's a specific worksheet and video that guides the parent through a process where they discover in their own lives. It may have something to do with school, it may be completely unrelated, where their own shame triggers are.
Mhm.
And when they've identified their own shame triggers, then they have a place in their mind that they can go to when their child is in shame. And it can automatically shift the dynamic from one of trying to control your child to one of empathy and compassion, because you really understand that your child is going through an experience that is so similar to your experiences. Because, all of our experiences pretty much come down to two emotions. Are we in fear, or are we in trust or love? So at the bottom of all of it, all the hardest times in your life to all the hardest times in your child's life to all the hardest times in people's lives all around the world is, when we're in a place of fear, and usually there's a narrative or a story of core deficiency. So it's a very powerful worksheet, and I would say, just to the parents that are listening to this, if you can identify where in your work, where in your parenting, where in your body image, wherever you have a story of not enoughness, and you just put a little sticky note in your mind that when your child is bringing up images about school, you have a reference point, so you can come not from sympathy of like, oh, poor you, but from empathy, where you're sharing this experience together.
Well, that was very powerful. It's going to be a tough worksheet to complete, but I think it's very valuable, and
Mhm.
I think it will make us better parents overall, not just for our children with dyslexia, but I do also see a lot of improvements that I have with my non-dyslexic child. And as you said, like looking into what triggers our emotions has been a huge one for me.
Oh,
Not the most pleasant one to work on, but that was one of the most valuable ones.
amazing.
And
Great.
you mentioned about self-compassion, and that's something that is very dear to my heart. Maybe we can dive into that a little bit as well.
Yeah, for sure. The best help self-development is self-compassion work. And I think that it's extremely important to start exploring with your child a conversation around self-compassion and some practices that help them engender self-compassion. And then at the same time, as a parent, for you to be exploring in tandem your own relationship to self-criticism and self-compassion, because you could never really teach that and embody that for your child if you haven't internalized and explored that yourself. So in a lot of the tools I talk about in my course, I always say it's not one and then the other, because they both need to happen at the same time. You can't kind of put your parenting on pause and do your own parent self-development work for a few years and then come back and say, I'm ready to be a parent. So both at the same time, but as parents, you need to be going through your own work, clearing out all your own limitations to being compassionate, clearing for your child, to being present to your child, to not being triggered to your child. And then you'll be able to teach those tools, those resilience tools and those emotional stability tools to your child. So one of them is self-compassion. And in the course, I get very granular about how actually to transition from the fight or flight mode to being compassionate with yourself. But ultimately, the research is showing that that's really the seed of resiliency. That when we talk about how do we have a high sense of self-efficacy, that we can go out and do what we want to do in the world, it's less about telling ourselves, I'm the best, I'm amazing, because there's always going to be people that are better at you. In whatever industry you are, there's always going to be people that are more successful and better than you. So that kind of thinking actually, in the end, sabotages you further, because you're affirming that you're superior, and then you go out into the world and all of a sudden you feel extra insecure because there's a part of you that realizes, hey, that's not true. I'm not the best. There are people that are so much more capable than me. So that's not helpful. That's not what you want to be telling your children, you're the best or you're the most. Because what it actually does is reinforces insecurity, because then they notice all the ways in which that's not true. What you want them to do is to become more and more comfortable with making mistakes, more and more comfortable with their human experience, with their struggle. And for that, it's very important to really develop a practice of self-compassion.
It all comes with growth mindset. Instead of going
Yeah.
towards a fixed mindset, we should always try to encourage, just like you said, a growth mindset with our children.
Yeah, it's very connected to self-compassion, because how do we stay out on the court and be open to growth, right? How do we stay out on the court of life, of school, of difficult, challenging situations when you want to run into the room and hide? How do you stay out and be open to growth? You need to be compassionate with yourself, because if you have this rigid, judgmental relationship with yourself where you're constantly, for the parents that are listening to this, they might be thinking like, I never go to the gym, I don't eat healthy, I keep getting fatter, I'm not doing any of my hobbies. If that's your constant inner talk, is one of judgmentalism, your body is going to want to protect yourself, and you're going to want to go into fight or flight, and you're not going to have energy left to really motivate you to do the scary, risky things. So what self-compassion practice does is it actually allows you to be in these super risky situations without your image of self being completely threatened.
That's a great point. Yes.
I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on this matter, doing this huge endeavor for the first time, pushing yourself so much. I'm sure you really noticed that. If you're going to be hard on yourself every time something goes wrong, you're just not going to want to do it anymore. You're going to be burnt out. Your nervous system is going to be burnt out.
I agree. Everybody knows that this is really out of my comfort zone, and I said, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? Maybe I'll help a few people, and that will be the one of the best things I probably accomplished in all my life, because we really picked up on my son's dyslexia because there were people around me who were very open about it, and who told me there were some websites I could go and search, and I talked to other parents who've been through this road before, and we were very lucky to have these people who openly talked about it, and they weren't ashamed of either their dyslexia or their children's dyslexia, and they change our family's life, especially my son's life. And I feel like I owe it to the world that I need to speak up right now. So it's hard, and it's something that we work on every day. I feel like this is something I'll work on until the day I die. But it's fun, once you start going on that mindset, it's really the opportunities are endless. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So along with the with self-compassion, I love mindfulness, and I try to teach my kids about that in every opportunity I have. So maybe we can touch base on that briefly as well.
Yeah, I think mindfulness is an extremely important muscle. Even the ability for a child or an adult to be present to what they're actually experiencing at the time. If they're experiencing anxiety about a test, to be present to that anxiety. If they're experiencing, thoughts of inadequacy, to be present to that experience. And in the course, I don't know if you remember, but I talked about first arrowing and second arrowing. That every difficult situation, you have the first arrow, which is the first group of emotions that you experience, which is, grief, frustration, pain. Like, for example, if you didn't get a job, let's say for the parents listening to this, you really wanted a job, you didn't get a job. So the first arrow of emotions would be the grief about not getting the job, the disappointment. But then the second arrow is the story we make about what happened. So then we tell ourselves a story of, I didn't get the job because I'm not smart enough, or I didn't get the job because I'm not pretty enough, or whatever story we make up about what's happening. And that's called the second arrow. And that's where a lot of the sticky pain comes from. So the first time you experience pain, but not necessarily does it stick onto you. And the second kind of pain, which is this narrative or story we tell ourselves about our fit deficiency, that's a very sticky kind of pain. It sticks onto us and it really drags us down. And if we can never get rid of the first arrow, we can never get rid of not experiencing grief, sadness, pain, frustration, disappointment, anger. And we don't want to get rid of those experiences, because those experiences tell us a lot about the world. If we didn't have disappointment after we got a job, maybe we wouldn't know that that's really the kind of industry we want to go into. Maybe it's just our disappointment not getting the job that we realize, wow, that was really important to me. So those emotions are very important. If we didn't have, disappointment, you could be a psychopath after you hurt somebody. But we want to get rid of the second arrow of emotions, because those are the arrows that they take us out of the court. They don't have us doing risky things. They have us, feeling bad about ourselves, leading to anxiety and, depression and just wallowing in your pain. And for parents that are listening to this, those are the emotions that inhibit us from showing up best to our parenting, and they're the emotions that inhibit our children from showing up best to their lives. So what mindfulness allows you to do is to get clear what's actually going on in your experience, what's actually going on in your mind. Are you first arrowing or are you second arrowing? And it can calm your entire nervous system down and reboot.
So now that parents have these tools, how can they talk to the teachers or the educators at their school to bring it on the same page, because we do hear a lot that there's some wonderful teachers out there who really don't understand uh, not just dyslexia but also the emotional sides. And coming up into a new school year, how can they share their children's experiences and their personalities with the teachers, and what are those basic things that they can tell their educators
Yeah.
so that they can
Yeah.
support their children in the classroom?
It's very complicated for a parent that has a child that isn't thriving in the school system. It could be very overwhelming and complicated knowing how to talk to the teachers about it, because the teachers are working so hard and they're doing their best. And sometimes their best is so far from what's actually a good experience for your child. And so there could be a lot of complicated dynamics that come up that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, how complicated navigating that as a parent may be. I think it's very important to always come from a place of gratitude and thanking the teachers for all the hard work that they are doing, because nobody goes into the teaching profession for money, and everybody is really, most people are really trying their best. And I think if teachers know that the feedback is coming from a place of gratitude, of thankfulness, of non-attack, they're so much more open. And then making sure that you're not attacking, or making sure that you're not coming from a place of anger, really sharing your truth and sharing your child's truth. And I think that if you're nervous that, like, I don't want to bring something up, I don't want to hurt her feelings, I don't want her to feel not appreciated, or I'll just sweep this under the rug, if you think about what you're actually doing is you're educating the teacher, because she is going to encounter so many other students that might have similar experiences. If your child is hurt by something she said or an attitude she had, it's not only your child that is missing out from her lack of education, but it's all the children that are going to encounter her. So when a parent begins to have a conversation with the teacher, what they're doing is like extremely important work for their child, but for all the other children in the community. It's really an act of giving back, nurturing, and educating the community of your school. And I think many of us went through the system. We think of teachers as they have it all figured out. They went to school, they studied education, they are the authorities. But really, it's just the way it is. Very often they didn't get the proper training. And if you have the training, or you have the education, or you know from your own experience with your child what's harmful, what's not helpful, you really need to stand in your power and share that, because it is such a gift that you can give to the school community, such a gift you can give to the teacher. And I think lay people, parents that are not involved in the industry, very often are uncomfortable claiming their knowledge and claiming their experience and claiming their voice. But it is so important for everybody, if you have a strong feeling about something, you have a strong opinion, to share that in a way that's non-combative, non-authoritative, because together we can really push the needle so much more than if people were just swallowing their feelings or their thoughts or their feedback.
That's a great point. I love your story. I know you have dyslexia and you're a successful professional out there. I would love to maybe touch base on your story a little bit as well. That always has it always encourages me to talk to adults who have dyslexia and are successful, and hear their story and a little bit of their experiences throughout childhood, because it's never easy to come to where you are. And I think parents need to hear that story as well, that even though many of these adults who are successful today have struggled, there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah,
We all
sure.
happy, successful individuals, even though we're struggling today.
Sure. So, like many dyslexics, I really peaked in preschool. And but I remember I loved going to school, and I got great feedback from my teachers, and I loved listening to stories and sharing feedback after story time and sitting around in a circle, and I would talk and share. And it's when I got to first grade that schools started becoming challenging for me. And increasingly by second grade and by third grade, the teachers were calling my parents and saying, which now in today's standards, it would never have gotten to third grade. Now it would have probably been caught in first grade. But then people were kind of, just pushing her along until third grade, where nobody could really not look anymore. Mm-hmm. And I was struggling with every single aspect of third grade. Rote memorization of math facts, writing, reading multiplication tables. It was just so much memorizing the essential fundamentals of learning, which very often dyslexic kids have a difficult time when memorizing all the rote rules, that everything came to the surface. And the teacher said, there's something very different about this kid. We think she should go for testing. And I did go for testing, and I got a generalized learning disability diagnosis. And nobody really knew what it meant. And essentially what it was is I went to resource room classes where everybody was just running around, and there was lots of prizes, glittery nail polish and balls from the 99-cent store. And it was mostly just an opportunity to get us out of the higher level reading classes, and we were just killing time. It wasn't very effective intervention, and it was mortifying. I remember being very, very, very aware that there were 2 or 3 students that were sent to, these resource room classes, and, why was I having a difficult time while other people weren't having a difficult time? One of my clearest memories was I was in 3rd grade, and every Friday we would get spelling test. And I remember overhearing one of the girls saying, I don't even know why the teacher gives us a spelling test. Everybody always gets 100. And I've never even passed a spelling test. I was failing every single week. So the sense that there was something very different about me was really profound. And that frustration of not thriving in my academic classroom translated into behavioral issues, and I was constantly sent to the principal's office, sent out into the hallways. I was this tiny little terrified kid. I remember just shaking in the hallways, being so scared because why am I getting kicked out of class? By 5th grade, I was, getting detention from school, and I wasn't allowed to come back to school for 3 days. My mother went out, and we went out for hamburgers, but it became this really big power struggle between me and the school. And to fast forward a little bit, when I was in a junior in high school, and I was really looking forward to getting into a great college where I'd be stimulated, where I felt like I'd be appreciated and I wouldn't be bored, because something else that I talk about very often is even if you're not doing well in school, even if you're not succeeding and getting good grades in school, very often dyslexics at the same time are bored and understimulated because they're not tapped into their dyslexic skills or advantages. So I was very bored, and I had all this hope pinned that things were really going to turn around for me when I got to college. And with the SATs and the APs and all the standardized testing that had to be done to get into a good college, it was just too much for me. And one day I woke up and I told my mom, I can't go back to school. And which ended up, my body just shut down. I must have slept for about 2 months. I woke up and I had meals, but I was just so burnt out. And my parents got a doctor's note that said I had mono, and I just could not go back to school. And eventually, half the year over, the school said, we don't buy it. It's been half the year. Either she comes back tomorrow or she's getting kicked out. So I went back to school and I finished up school, but that was a really big turning point where it was it didn't matter how much I was ambitious or how much I wanted to persevere and how much I wanted to show up and give it my all. My body was at that point completely done. My mind and psyche was completely done. And fast forward, I eventually did go to college, and I was fascinated by individual differences, what made the human mind, what made me, and how I had such different experiences than my friends, both negative but also positives. I always felt like I had a lot of skills and abilities that people around me didn't have. So I went into cognitive science to try to understand learning and psychology. And so I specialized in psychology, cognitive science, and education. And then after I had my first child, and I was transitioning out of the industry that I was in, and I had an opportunity I wanted to create my own business and do my own thing that would be good as a mommy work situation. And I wanted to, be flexible and work from anywhere and work from home. That I knew that dyslexia was a really unanswered question for me. I still didn't fully, after going to school and studying cognitive science and education, I felt like it gave me a lot of tools to begin to understand individual differences in learning, but I still wanted to make sense of my own experiences. And so that's when I started the blog and the YouTube show that ended up being a podcast all about my dyslexia quest, which was really exploring dyslexia. And then more and more people started emailing me saying, can you hop on Skype? I just want to talk to you about what's going on in our family. Can we talk to you? Which turned into the consultancy. And then I reached out to the community asking, where do they want more support? How can I support them more and really be there for them in this places where there are significant pain points? And that's when the community answered back to me that self-esteem was something that they really needed more support, which to me felt like a eureka moment, because so much of my life I've been exploring this concept of, how do I rebuild my self-esteem and my resilience, despite having had really difficult experiences all the way from first grade till I graduated high school. So it's been an inquiry that I've been on personally, and I've been merging my cognitive science background and fascination in all the nerdy things about dyslexia, how the brain works, what it means with all the self-development, mindfulness, things I've been interested in. So that's what this is. So now the course is a big focus of mine, and that's kind of me in a nutshell.
That's an amazing story, and you're an inspiration to me for sure. So,
you're an inspiration to me.
So I come across a lot of parents who say we don't want to tell our child that they have a learning disability or they have dyslexia, because we don't want to label them. We don't want them to, them to feel different than other people in their class. And I always felt personally through my experience that these children already know that there's something different, good or bad, it's indifferent, but there's something different about them versus their classmates, and they, I think, feel it. And I personally felt that explaining to the children that they have a learning difference, and it doesn't make them stupider or smarter. They're just different. They learn differently, and they have their own strengths and weaknesses, just like the person sitting next to them in the class. Everybody's unique. So what's your take on that? Like, what would you advise parents, and how would they be talking to their children? I don't know if that's in your comfort zone or not, but I'm just curious. Going through your story, I was intrigued by that, and I was wondering how you felt about this.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that similar kind of experience happened to me. So I think when my parents got the learning disability diagnosis, they were like a little shocked by it, because the language isn't helpful, because when they looked at their daughter, they saw me as somebody who loved learning and who was a rapid learner but just wasn't doing well in school. And I think they felt uncomfortable using that kind of language with me. And that's why I don't remember anybody talking to me about anything. It was when I went into my mother's paperwork later as an adult, I was like, wow, I got diagnosed in third grade. And then eventually when I went to high school, I went to a private high school, and I remember my parents saying, we're not going to tell them anything about a learning disability past because you won't get accepted. So they're like, nobody wants, another problem student. So that was definitely a big part of my journey, was not having explicit conversations with the school and with me. This is what's going on. This is who you are. And it was very, very harmful, because I couldn't make sense out of my experience. And you're 100% correct when you talk about kids. No, a child, students in the class are keenly aware of if they're struggling in school, if they're not struggling in school, and how they compare to their peers. And so the gift of beginning to have a conversation about dyslexia is you give them the gift of being able to understand why they're not succeeding, so they don't need to make up stories about who they are in the world, why they're not succeeding. I'm lazy, I don't try hard enough, everybody else is more ambitious, everybody cares. Whatever it is, they know exactly why some situations are more difficult for them. And an example of that is, I remember in high school, I was taking a social studies class, and every night we have to read a chapter in the textbook. And every night I would tell myself, I'm actually going to do this homework this week. I'm actually going to take out my textbook and read and come in ready for the discussions. And I never did it. I would start and I would lose the place and I wouldn't continue reading. And I remember telling myself, I need to buckle up. I need to be resolute. I need to commit. And it was only until after I graduated high school, when I got into audiobooks, that I really realized I don't understand 50% of what I'm reading in a textbook. No wonder I never did the homework. And it was such a eureka moment, because I was writing in my planners, you need to buckle up, you need to actually do the homework, you need to get through the reading. I didn't even factor in the fact that I wasn't doing the reading because it was so unenjoyable for me, because I was missing half of the content. So I wasn't able to make that connection. And so instead, the connection that I made was, I don't follow through on my responsibilities, that everybody else is doing what they need to do, but I'm too lazy. So I think it is so important. Information is power, and being able to make sense out of your reality is the biggest gift parents can give children.
Oh, that's beautiful. I felt the same way. My comprehension has not been, great throughout my middle school and high school. And I would always say, "What's wrong with me?" Everybody would read it and they would understand, and I wouldn't be able to grasp what they have grasped from the written material. And I would always think, "What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me?" Whereas now, I see that nothing was wrong with me. It's just that I learned differently, and audiobooks were the way to go for me as well.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah.
So, for those people who want to learn more about you and what you do, and of course your podcast and your classes, could you tell us about these a bit more?
Sure. So whenever you're listening to this, the best way to get in touch is with the weekly show. If you listen to the podcast, The Dyslexia Quest, you can find it on iTunes or Stitcher. I'm sure you'll have some links around the summit. And that's the best way to stay in the loop with everything that's coming out of Elisheva Schwartz, which is me and my assistant Erica, and yeah. So the courses, they're a 6-week course. As of now, we're doing it twice a year. There might be an opportunity to do it 3 times a year. I don't know when this is coming out, but we're starting the next course September 7th. I think this is coming out a little bit after, so we'll probably be in the middle of the 6-week course. But if you're interested, you can always email me at Elisheva Schwartz. Maybe you can have that written down, and we'll make sure you're in the list to find out about the course next time. And I think what's really interesting about the course is it's an online course, but we all do it together. So we're going to be getting together 3 times throughout the course. Something new that we're doing this time that we didn't do when you were doing it is everybody's going to have a partner that they're going to go through the course with, so they really get that sense of community. They really get to know other people, and they can learn from the fellow participants. So it's great because there's the flexibility of self-study. You can do the videos whenever you're ready for them, but there's also the sense of community that you're all going through this journey together.
The community part was huge for me, to bounce ideas back and forth and to feel that I wasn't the only parent who was struggling and felt that way. There are ups and downs every day, and I love talking to every parent in that class. And as you know, we're still a part of the Facebook group and we chat here and there. That was an amazing experience, and I recommend that not just to parents but to every educator out there. I think that will be very valuable for educators to hear how they can help children to build self-esteem as well.
Yeah, it was special. I learned so much from the people taking the course and the community of parents. It's very special.
Well, thank you so much again for joining me.
It's my absolute pleasure.
I will have all the links in